Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. In this video we'll be going through a tool called the Virtual Vacuum Former in D3Lab. The reason it's named that is because it tries to emulate what a vacuum former does in real life. It's a tool that's very common to dentistry, and this is something that just tries to replicate that but in a virtual environment. All a vacuum former does is essentially takes a certain material and makes a shell around a given model. And that's what this does here, but again, just in a virtual setting. So you can give it as parameters a certain thickness, a certain offset value if you want, and it will then generate a perfect shell that goes around whatever object you give it at that thickness and at that offset. So it's kind of a very generic thing, actually. It's a generic tool, and you can think of it like that can be used in many other industries, even outside of dentistry. But for today's example, we'll be going through just a simple one, but I think it clearly demonstrates how the tool works, and then you can extrapolate from there how you would use it in other use cases. Let's say we have an upcoming bridge preparation appointment that involves extracting tooth number 10, preparing teeth numbers 9 and 11, and then provisionalizing and reappointing for a final impression. We were lucky enough to capture some pre-op scans at the treatment planning appointment. We've already used the other tools in D3Lab to do a virtual workup of what we plan to do at that appointment. We use the virtual extraction tool and the virtual prep tools to simulate what's going to be done. And we have that model, and we could 3D print that out and have it available chairside. However, the way we're going to use the virtual vacuum forming tool in this example is to attempt to create a shell of the original pre-op teeth in order to directly 3D print with a resin like indirect bonding tray that we can then use as a provisional matrix or a reduction guide or both. It doesn't take, generally speaking, it doesn't take any extra time to print duplicate copies of the same model. So whether you want 1 or 5, it wouldn't really necessarily require any extra time cost on your part. So we already have our virtual vacuum former tool selected in the D3Lab menu. Our model that we want to use the tool on is loaded and ready to go. So we're going to hit the Go button to start the tool. The first step here presents us with some options to potentially modify either the teeth or the model. Can add attachments like ortho attachments, virtual extractions. You can do a virtual wax up at that point, things like that, before you actually get going on the virtual vacuum forming. We don't need any of that, so I'm just going to hit go. In the next step here, it's asking us to draw the border of the virtual vacuum former output here. So the trim line, the margin, whatever you want to call it, we just need to draw the border of our appliance here. And for us, we're going to want to include the original teeth, like we said, then also probably maybe 1 or 2 adjacent teeth and a little bit of the palate, just to aid in retention when this thing is fully seated. Before we've used, even though this is a segmented model, we've done tricks to easily select teeth and things like that. In this particular example, it's actually better to use this drawing tool. The reason is because we're not just selecting either the gums or the teeth, but it's a combination of both. As you can see right here, we're kind of going directly through the center of this tooth. And it really helps to just draw with this tool instead of using the segmentation tricks that we were doing earlier. So I'm just kind of drawing a little border here, outline what I think would be enough to support the retention and be thick enough for 3D printing and everything like that. Like I said, maybe 1 or 2 teeth adjacent to the ones we're working on. And finish up that selection. And that looks pretty good. We can choose the thickness here if we're using indirect bonding tray. I've noticed that you kind of want to make it a little bit on the thicker side than the default value, so either 1.5 or 2. The impression spacer gap for this example is going to be 0. We want this flush with the teeth, and the indirect bonding tray material is flexible enough to where I think you could get this fully seated onto the model without any offset. These steps are asking if you want to do, stops or the perforations like we did in the custom tray. Again, in this example, we don't need to do any of those things, so we're just going to hit next through both of those steps, and then we'll start to generate our provisional matrix here. And we chose 1.5 millimeters, so this little matrix will be 1.5 millimeters, which should be sufficient to 3D print with the indirect bonding tray material. You'd want to have the supports obviously on the outside of this, so the inside wouldn't be affected by removing the supports at all. The other benefit here is that the indirect bonding tray material is also clear. So as far as using it for a reduction guide, I think it's a plausible case as well. So everything's finished up here, and it gives you some more options as far as would you like to add some labels or things like that. This is they don't really apply in this case, but it's a nice offset shell, or actually not an offset, just a nice shell of the original scan data. And when this thing prints, it's going to be a really crisp, high resolution print that can be done with the technology of our 3D printers at such a high resolution. So these could very well make some exceptionally nice looking provisionals. That's what it looks like on the model there. And yeah, you can send that to the 3D printing software and get that ready to print. All right, well, thank you so much for watching. This is just a quick example of how this could work. I have a few other examples and some other videos of how you may consider using this. I've also kind of heard recently that there's the soft night guard resin that's coming out. And this could also be used in that scenario if you're trying to fabricate a soft night guard where maybe occlusion is just static, then you could definitely be generating some appliances with that resin as well. Well, thank you so much. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you soon.